We want to begin by asking three microphone and speak to their view of the governor's address, of the status of the Illinois state budget as it impacts upon areas where they're attempting to provide services to the people of Illinois. So, Steve, who will be the first to begin?
Karen?
Karen?
Good afternoon, Speaker Madigan, General Assembly members, and members of the press. My name is Karen Ortiguera. I was a case manager for the Illinois Breast and Cervical Cancer Program at Mercy Hospital in Chicago for 8 years. I'm here today because IBCCP has not received state funding since July. Imagine facing the prospect of death from uninsured at the time you discovered a lump. This is Megan, a single freelance writer who called me 2 months ago at Mercy, home of the largest IBCCP agency in the state. She was afraid of the expenses, and now she may pay with her life. However, she does have a chance to fight, thanks to the Illinois Breast and Cervical Cancer Program. In her own words, IBCCP is a godsend. Despite its critical role, IBCCP is at risk. Lack of funding has already placed over 700 women on Mercy's waiting list alone, ready to be screened for breast and cervical cancer. Breast cancer, when detected at an early age, has a 5-year survival rate of a stunning 99%, and cervical cancer 91%. Early detection saves lives, and treatment is cheaper. It's estimated that more than 75,000 Illinois women lacked access to health care coverage and remain eligible for IBCCP in 2015. That's 75,000 of Illinois' mothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, and friends who need our IBCCP staff to pick up the phone and say, yes, let me help you get scheduled today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Speaker Madigan, members of the press. At the end of his speech, the governor said, we can't wait any longer. We'll need... Who am I? My name's Polly Poskin. I'm the executive director of the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We're the state... Poskin. We are the statewide association of 29 community-based rape crisis centers and 17 satellites across the state of Illinois serving rape survivors. At the end of his address today, the governor said, we can't wait any longer. Well, neither can rape victims. The downward spiral for rape victims has begun. The Rape Crisis Center in Charleston has cut all staff hours by 25%. RACES, the Sexual Assault Center in Urbana, will cut staff hours by 20% starting February 1st. The Rape Crisis Center in Danville has laid off one staff person and cannot fill a second vacant position, leaving only 2 people to serve Vermilion County. Rape Victim Advocates in Chicago has a waiting list of 100 survivors. If this budget crisis is not solved soon, there will be a few hundred employees at rape crisis centers not employed, nobody serving rape victims. Rape crisis centers are able to promote the healing of victims and assist in the pursuit of justice because the United States government and the state of Illinois since the late 1970s passed laws and then appropriated funds for the purpose of supporting survivors of sexual assault and ending sexual violence in all of our lives. Today, the governor of our great state failed to acknowledge that he has defied those statutory foundations, historical commitments, and proposed solutions. Our governor failed to mention that the vast majority of those federal funds appropriated to the state of Illinois for rape victims is due to run out at the end of March 2016. Then only a pittance of federal funds are available to rape crisis centers through June 2016, far short of what is needed to keep 24-hour services available to victims. Federal funds are far short of what is needed to keep people employed through June 2016, providing these critical, sometimes life-saving services. He failed to say that he has not signed a 2016 budget that reflects the state of Illinois' 31-year commitment to fund rape crisis services. Perhaps the governor is unaware that rape crisis centers, one by one, will close if the state of Illinois does not honor its 2016 contract for services to rape victims.
Karen, can we have your last name please spelled? O-R-T-I-G-A-R-A. Thank you.
Ortiguera?
Yes.
O-R-T-I-G-A.
G-A-R-A.
Good afternoon.
and thank you for allowing me to speak here. And Speaker Madigan, my name is Bob Tiemann. I'm the Executive Director for the Illinois Association of Community Care Program Home Care Providers, long name, and the Emergency Home Response. I also represent the Illinois Adult Day Services as Legislative Monitor.
And your last name, Bob, again?
Tiemann, it's T as in Thomas, H-I-E-M-A-N. We're asking for your help, and that of all the state of Illinois, to secure the payments to providers on behalf of the seniors of the state. The CCP program is basically 70% Medicaid and 30% in the process of spend down to meet that eligibility. Yet, these are the people who are suffering harm in the decision to halt payments in light of an unapproved budget. Providers are receiving some Medicaid payments because of the lawsuit that we brought forth, but a large chunk of it is left behind and not even being processed. 3 points I want to bring out. Number one, closures of providers such as Lutheran Social Services, Shea Health Center, Home Care Personal Services, all have occurred this fiscal year. Now, you're all well aware of Lutheran Social Services, but also Catholic Charities is now thinking very strongly about the processes. If this continues, that they will have to close. They are currently owed $16 million, and they are basically not being paid $2 million a month. There's not too many businesses that can survive that. This is also destroying the human services network within the community care program. Point two, meals are now being reduced due to shortage of funding. Transportation in some areas for doctor appointments, dialysis, and other necessities are being limited or discontinued. Congregate meals are being reduced and in some cases eliminated. So who's going to eat? What senior is going to eat? How much are they going to eat? Are they going to be able to get to their doctor's appointments, to the dialysis? Who's going to service them? Providers are letting staff go and have all but exhausted their ability far beyond the contractual obligations of their 90-day reserves. In fact, it is estimated that by the time, if this continues on, they could be as much as $33 million in additional debt, just trying to maintain the program. Without a budget, the likelihood of more home care agencies shutting their doors is likely. Daycare centers will be or have already closed, and in some cases, these locations are the only place that seniors can receive medical and physical occupational therapy without expensive emergency room care, costing anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 a visit, that the state will pay because they're Medicaid. When will the state understand that to maintain employment, services to the most vulnerable, and others, that a budget must be done and appropriations made to keep businesses from closing and seniors from suffering? And point three, providers are wondering that once a budget is passed, will they receive those payments? In closing, please keep in mind the words spoken by the late Hubert Humphrey in his final speech. The moral test of government is how that government treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children, those in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those who are in the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped. How will history judge the state of Illinois? Thank you.
Did you have any questions of any of these people?
I guess to any of you, you all spoke a lot about the governor's role in this. To what extent do you think that lawmakers should be stepping up? They are controlled by Democrats right now. Do you think that they're doing enough on their end to get a budget through in the majorities?
The budget that was passed for 2016 by the General Assembly contained funding for rape crisis centers, approximately $6.5 million. So our General Assembly, the Senate and the House, passed the budget, demonstrated about their 31-year commitment to funding for rape crisis centers. The governor vetoed it.
But the General Assembly never tried to override him. Sorry. I mean, so I
Maybe
guess
we correctly anticipated the Republican position. That there would be
you have
sufficient
supermajority,
votes.
though.
No, we don't. We don't have a working supermajority. Now, any further questions for these people?
Yeah, I have one, and either any of the three could answer it. Is it, do you think that the Democrats should try to pass a tax increase on their own?
Would you speak at the microphone?
I think a tax increase is the responsibility of all of us, legislators and the general public, to ask the state of Illinois to provide the necessary revenue to provide the services for the people. So I think Republicans have to step up the same way Democrats have stepped up and say they can support tax revenue.
Just any further questions for these people?
How long before you run out?
Question for who, please?
For the, yes, I'm sorry, for the public. For any of the providers, how long before you just have to close down? How near are you to shutting down? And if you do shut down, can you turn the lights back on? Or once you're out of business, it's gonna take you months or years to reconstitute?
With the community care program and the providers in that regard, they will have to go through the contracting process again if they do close their doors completely through the Department on Aging. There are quite a few that they're going from day to day. Are they going to make payroll Friday? There's no reserves left. I can't tell you enough that they have exhausted every means and avenue. We have one that they haven't made their mortgage payment in the past 4 months, and the bank is getting ready to foreclose on the property. It's that critical. And the problem with the community care program is that 70% of it is Medicaid, 30% of it is non-Medicaid. We took them to court. We took the state to court to get the Medicaid payments. We have to go to court every 2 weeks to keep it going. And because of the fact we're not getting the Medicaid, the department isn't even processing those payments. So they're not even over at the comptrollers for any consideration whatsoever. They're being held in pending. And that's where we come into the fact that Lutheran Social Services was owed over $6 million. Catholic Charities, $2 million a month. No business can survive long on that before they have to shut their doors. Now, can they come back? With community care, that's a probability because they can, at that point, reapply for a contract, go through the contracting process, but not necessarily with adult day. When adult day is gone, it's gone. And there isn't somebody else out there to bring it back in. It's disappeared. And maybe there's another company later on that may want to try to bring that in, but the damage is already done. Because seniors now are either going to wind up in a nursing home, which I guarantee you under Medicaid, the state of Illinois is going to pay 3 to 4 times as much, and they will have to pay it. And the same thing with regard to emergency room visits. You're going to see more of those happen. And we're talking $5,000 to $10,000 a shot. I mean, it doesn't, in terms of business, it doesn't make sense.
Mr. Speaker, can we get your thoughts on the governor's speech of what he said about the budget or what he didn't say?
You're
about
persistent. Any more questions of these other people? If there's no further questions, I have some opening remarks, and it's a follow-up to the governor's comments during his speech, where he talked in terms of accomplishments where there had been cooperation with the members of the legislature. And I'd like to highlight 4 of those areas and then make a point. Number 1, the governor talked in terms of record K through 12 spending, record spending for elementary and secondary education. Number 2, the governor talked in terms of the correction to the FY15 budget. 3, he talked in terms of landmark public safety legislation such as body cameras and other police reforms. And lastly, he talked in terms of unemployment insurance, which happened through what we call the agreed bill process. All of these things happened. All of these happened with cooperation with people in the legislature. And in each instance, please understand, the governor did not demand his program, which would lower wages for middle-class families and their standard of living and send injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. So again, these 4 areas happened. There was cooperation. Please note, at no time during the deliberation on these issues did the governor lay down his current demand that his program be enacted, a program which would bring down the wages and the standard of living of middle-class families and send injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. Okay, questions?
Mr. Speaker, the governor said something about working with President Cullerton. He mentioned that a couple of times. I believe Mr. President Cullerton told public TV something like, you know, we're going to work with the governor. Yet here, you brought on some of these folks, and it sounds to me like you're still on the offensive. Why is that?
Concerning the governor's interest in working with President Cullerton, in which area, please? Pensions or education?
I heard the name Cullerton quite a bit in there.
Twice.
That's twice more than working with you.
That's okay.
And then this pension thing, yeah, it
I'll,
sounds like.
I'll survive that.
It sounds like they're arm in arm on it, kumbaya. So,
So-
why are they kind of together on it, yet you are doing the pushback?
So on the question of pensions, I'm very anxious to see the governor's language. The governor made a public announcement a few days ago on pensions. He said he was going to support President Cullerton's bill. I don't know that the language has been made available. I think all of you know that I spent 4 to 5 years fighting against unions in order to pass Senate Bill 1, which was a pension reform bill. Unfortunately, the Illinois Supreme Court disagreed with the bill and found the bill to be invalid under the Illinois Constitution. I'm open on all pension questions, and I'm anxious to see the governor's language.
Mr. Speaker, what do you make of what the governor said about the budget situation right now, or what he didn't say about the budget?
Well, I think it's interesting that you make the point that the governor's speech did not deal with the fact that there is no budget for the current fiscal year. It's very interesting that the governor would come before a joint session of the General Assembly speaking to the state of the state of Illinois and decline to comment that we don't have a full budget for this particular fiscal year. I certainly would have appreciated it had he done that, had he offered some comment as to why that hasn't happened.
Mr. Speaker, what do you think of the governor saying how non-competitive Illinois is versus other states?
Well, that's the governor's program, which would bring down the wages and the standard of living of middle-class families and send injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. That's his program.
How was this first year compared with all the other governors you've watched since you came here?
I found it very interesting
In what respect?
in a lot of respects.
The governor is characterizing this as an olive branch, open door conciliation. Did you hear a hand extended? Did you hear notes of conciliation in this speech?
You may recall at the time of the legislative inauguration in January of 2015, I pledged to work cooperatively with Governor Rauner. I pledged to work with him cooperatively and professionally, and I've renewed that pledge on several occasions, including today. So I stand ready to work on any problem facing the government of the state of Illinois. And I would say again that where we've come together and worked together without the governor's demand that we enact his program, which would bring down the wages and the standard of living of middle-class families, that we've accomplished a great deal.
But did you find the governor's speech cooperative and reasonable? Did you find the language in the speech that he used cooperative and reasonable?
I found it very interesting. I followed every word in his speech. And you do know that we are in continuous session, don't you?
What did you make about his attacks on Democratic allies, on labor and absentee being paid too much, and then also brought up trial lawyers and said you're here with them?
My goal is to work professionally and cooperatively with the governor. We have some very serious problems, as these people have spoken to. You heard the comments of the people that are standing behind me. These are very serious problems. They all relate to budget making, to the continuing deficit of the state of Illinois, and that's what we ought to address. We ought to get busy, sit down. What can we do to solve this budget problem? I've said consistently that what we need to do is some cuts in state spending, such as Senate Bill 788, which would have reduced the Medicaid program by $400 million. But at the same time, I've said publicly that I would be prepared to support more taxes on the wealthy. I'm prepared to do that. But it's got to be a balanced approach.
He was repeatedly said you use a supermajority to pass a tax on your own. You said just now that your supermajority is.
His statement that the Democrats on their own would pass a tax increase is just not realistic. It just doesn't bear scrutiny here in the Capitol. But you're here quite a bit, you know that.
Speaker, there were a lot of people on the Republican side of the aisle clapping throughout the speech, but there was one of your members also joining them, Representative Duncan. Do you have anything to say about that? And does that speak to your supermajority not being as strong as some believe?
You know, this is America, and we still have freedom in this country, and people are free to applaud when they want to applaud and not applaud when they don't want to applaud.
So you don't have as much control as...
I don't have as much control as certain people in the media have claimed for years.
You talked about
Why is he allowed
tax
to
on the
caucus
wealthy.
with you still? Well, why is Ken Duncan allowed in your caucus?
That's a good question.
Are you thinking about not letting that happen?
I just think it's a good question.
Well, Mr. Speaker,
What's the
speaking of
answer?
Excuse me now, we've had a little bit from
But I
you.
talked to you about CPS.
Sure.
And the plan that the Republicans proposed of
Yeah.
taking over and
Yeah.
perhaps bankruptcy, and I have a follow-up.
Yeah. Well, number one, I read a summary of the bills that would provide for the bailout of the Chicago school system. I haven't had a chance to really analyze the bills and to fully appreciate how they would work and what the impact would be. But I do find it very interesting that the governor and his Republican allies in the legislature are proposing a bailout of the Chicago school system.
Would that be a good idea to take over for the state?
Well, that's what I'd like to have some time before I can render a judgment, but it clearly would be a bailout.
You've met with Kara Lewis privately, I've been told. How did that go, and where do you see the CPS contract and CTU going?
They're in bargaining today. They've been in bargaining for several weeks. The latest reports are that the current bargaining appears to be done in good faith on both sides. They're attempting to move to an agreement which would provide for an extension of the contract. I don't know all of the details, and I'm clearly not in a position to be commenting on what's being discussed in collective bargaining.
Speaker, can you address, speaking of education, the governor proposed withholding state dollars if there's not cost savings, or maybe giving state dollars to universities if there are cost savings? Can you address that?
Well, our interest is in the state budget making. And in the spring and in May, we adopted a state budget that would have provided support for all elements of education, from elementary and secondary through high school, community colleges, the universities. We're really not in the position to be commenting on the governor's remarks of today.
What about the P3 that he's talking about? There was an agreement, you guys kind of altered his.
Well, there are numerous groups that work to improve education. They should all be lauded, and they do good work. And from time to time, there are proposed changes in the composition and the arrangement of these groups. We should just maintain an open mind on that. The important point is there are so many Illinoisans that are willing to volunteer to improve the quality of education and the quality of instructions that we ought to bring them in and work with them. The governor talked in terms of working again with President Cullerton, which is a good thing, in the area of education. And I would like to point out that in the House, we've had a bipartisan group chaired by the Majority Leader, Representative Curry, for several months. And it's bipartisan. We've reached out to every member of the House, regardless of where their district is located, regardless of their political party. And our goal is to do a real good study of the school aid formula and the total method of distribution of the school money, with a view toward where we can correct inadequacies, where we can correct deficiencies, and just do a much better job where the state is called upon to support education, especially at the level of elementary and secondary education.
Speaker, you talked about a tax on the wealthy. Is that the millionaire's tax, or do you want to expand that? Because that doesn't seem like it would be anywhere near enough to fill the budgetary gap that Illinois is facing right now.
Well, it's all part of my position, which you've heard on several occasions, which I don't think you can simply cut your way out of the budget problem. I think you need a balanced approach. You need cuts such as Senate Bill 788, which would have cut the Medicaid program by $400 million, and you need new revenue. And in terms of finding new revenue, I've said consistently that I'm prepared to negotiate with the governor, but I do believe that as part of a revenue package that we ought to have increased taxes on the wealthy of Illinois.
When you say what, Speaker, what Have you offered anything in exchange? Because a lot of people criticize your position that you're not giving up anything and you're expecting the governor to come all the way to your position. Would you say whether that's true? And number two, if I might, before any of this is resolved, we might have any number of social service agencies that are permanently out of business, some schools collapse. Would you be willing to move a funding bill? Because the only two groups that are really getting slammed by this standoff are social service agencies and higher education. Would you move a bill to fund those so that they don't go out of business in the meantime?
To quote one of our witnesses, you'll recall that the legislature in May passed provided funding for these areas.
With respect, it doesn't help now.
And I'm sure you know that under the Illinois Constitution, the governor is given great veto power. So number one, he can exercise a complete veto. Number two, he can do a reduction veto in the area of appropriations. Number three, he can do a line item veto in the area of appropriations. When the governor got that budget in May, he could have exercised all of those powers under the Constitution. He could have refashioned that budget to his liking, and he would have been in a position to continue support for the agencies of the people that are standing behind
If
me.
he did not do that, would you move a bill to fund these people to keep them viable until the state?
Question about meeting the governor halfway, because we have done that. As an example, the governor spent a lot of time today talking about workers' compensation. And what he means is he wants to reduce the benefit level in workers' compensation. He wants to send injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. The House has passed a workers' compensation bill. We've done changes in the system, and they ought to be done. The House bill also provided for rate regulation of the insurance companies that sell workers' compensation insurance. There have been studies in the last few months, they're acknowledged, they're agreed to, that the cost of workers' compensation in Illinois has come down since 2011. But the rates charged for the insurance have not come down. To me, that says we ought to do rate regulation of insurance companies selling workers' compensation insurance in Illinois, as is done in a majority of the states in the country. That's number one. Number two, the governor talked in terms of wanting to privatize the operation of the Illinois Economic Development Agency, which is the Department of Commerce and Economic, working with the governor. We worked with the governor. We exchanged ideas. We negotiated. We gave him what he wanted. We put one item in there that he didn't agree to, which was what we call a 3-year sunset, which would be an automatic review of what would be happening under privatization of this agency. Privatization has happened all over the country. The results are a mixed bag. And where the governor was the chair of the board, taking campaign contributions from companies getting benefits from the board. The scandal was such that the governor had to resign from the board and move new legislation to remove the governor from the board. These agencies are a mixed bag. And so my request was, Governor, we'll give you what you want, but 3 years from now, let's do an automatic review to see if it's working. If it's not working, then we'll move in a different direction. Governor talked in terms of reducing property taxes. In the House, we've called legislation that would freeze property taxes 17 times. 17 times. On all 17 occasions, about 40 Democrats voted for the bill, close to 0 Republicans. So if the governor wanted a freeze in property taxes, he could have instructed the House Republicans to support this bill, be over in the Senate, and complained that the members of the legislature were going to get an anticipated COLA adjustment. We moved legislation to suspend the anticipated COLA adjustment and at the same time kept at a level the what's called the per diem and the travel allowances. And then lastly, again, where we've worked cooperatively with the governor, we've talked about the absence of a state budget for Illinois, but since Rauner became the governor on 3 occasions, we've done budget making. We've done appropriation bills that he signed 3 times. At the very beginning, he complained that the then budget was out of balance and it needed a correction. We exchanged ideas. We sent the bill to the governor. He signed the bill. He lauded the bill today, number one. Number two, Later, the governor requested that we pass a bill to appropriate federal money, which we did, and in response to his further request, we put money in there for McCormick Place on its bond payments. Lastly, just in December, there was a bill being advanced by Representative Moylan that would have provided appropriation. Prepared to move the bill. The governor gave us a request, add items for the operations of state government. Again, we talked, exchanged ideas, fashioned the bill, sent the bill to the governor, he signed the bill. What's significant in all three instances where these things did happen is at no time did the governor lay down his demand that he get his agenda, which would bring down the wages and the standard of living of middle-class families and send injured workers to welfare and to the emergency room. All three instances, at no time did he lay down that demand. So I think we have a real good prescription for solving our problems, which would be for the governor to take a little different view of what should be done in terms of this agenda that he's got for middle-class families.
If he
Was
isn't
there
willing to
anything that
budge
you
off
heard
that agenda,
today?
Speaker, is there any scenario you can see where this budget impasse drags beyond November?
Well, you'll recall, the legislature passed the budget in May. It was a good spending plan. I publicly acknowledged at the time that we didn't have the money to pay for the budget that we sent to the governor, but we were prepared to negotiate with the governor to find new revenue for the state. I'm still prepared to do that. I would say, as I said earlier, that we need a balanced approach. We need to reduce some spending, and at the same time, we need to raise taxes on the wealthy.
But if he doesn't budge, do you see this dragging past the
Well,
election?
I would hope that it doesn't. I mean, I've been prepared to work on these issues since January of 2015.
Did you hear anything today, Speaker?
Missing in his education plan, some people are upset that MAP grants were mentioned in his 10-point description.
Sure, I listened to the 10-point description. The staff did a good job in putting that together. We support MAP grants. You know, the Democrats in the legislature support MAP grants. There should be no doubt about that. That's money for poor children to get a college education.
Is there a bill coming? We've been hearing that there's a Democratic bill coming on that soon, separate bill, and maybe the Republicans will have a separate proposal on that as well.
3 o'clock.
Yeah, there will be a bill in House Committee today at 3 o'clock that would appropriate for the MAP grants and for the community colleges.
Speaker, today,
Amanda?
This week, friends of mine, Madigan, dropped a mailer on Jason Gonzalez. When your members have primaries or general elections, you strongly encourage them to walk the precincts every day. Have you been walking precincts?
I've done some walking. Yeah, I've been very well received.
Do you plan to continue that?
We're waging a strong campaign in House District 22. We expect to be successful. Yeah.
Speaker, it appears as if, although the effort that you've addressed, the partial privatization of DCEO stalled in the legislature, Rauner says he's filed articles of incorporation to do evidently some form of solely private, or I don't quite know how that will work. What are your thoughts on going that route?
Well, I'd be interested to know what the connection will be with the government. So the way I heard it, he's going to gather together a group outside of the government. I believe that Mayor Emanuel has done this in Chicago. And that's fine as it goes, but then I like to know what will be the connection between this group and what happens over at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity.
Mr. Speaker, what's the likelihood that this budget 2016 has to get wrapped into 2017, which is going to start, we're going to hear about next month?
Yeah, that shouldn't happen. It could have been avoided back in May and June when, you know, the governor could have used his power under the Constitution to do a reduction veto, line item veto.
But is it likely now?
You've talked to this before about
Speaker, do you have any
how the governor
comment on
continues to
CPS's
try
inability to borrow?
divide you and President Cullerton. Is he having any successes?
I don't think he is. I'm not focused on the personalities. I'm not focused on divide and conquer. I'm focused on these issues. I've spent a great deal of time to understand the issues. I'm prepared to work on the issues. I think they're of great significance. And I think that the longer we wait, the more damage we do. So we ought to get about the business of correcting the fiscal problems of the state of Illinois.
Speaker, did you hear anything today that means year 2 is going to be any better? You hear any sort of thing today?
Well, I had a pleasant experience here with the media, so that's encouraging.
Thanks, everybody. Hey, your wife clapped at term limits. What do you think of that?
My wife what?
Clapped when the governor said term limits. I have a wonderful wife.